if you could take a moment and go to thegrowingbanddirector.com to give at least $5 or $3 a month, and it helps the content continue to be created for you to help our profession grow. Let's go back to our scheduled episode. Welcome back to the Growing Band Director podcast. This is episode number 240. A wonderful conversation I'm happy to bring you between Philip Walters, the band director in Alaska, and an administrator in Alaska named Nathan Coronado. He's a music administrator, and they have a great conversation about not only what does the day-to-day look like for an administrator, but like what are the most challenging parts of being a music administrator? What do you find most enjoyable about being a music administrator? How do you feel your impact, everything that you're having is as an administrator? I know a lot of people think about going into music admin, and sometimes they want to know from music admin kind of what they're thinking. So this episode's a great way to get a little bit into that. What should people do if they want to be administrator? Like, what are some step-by-step things you need to do if you want to do that? One of the jobs as administrator is to evaluate how music educators are doing their jobs. We all know that. So what are some things that administrators look at where they can tell, yeah, this person gets it? Or how do we know when a teacher's struggling, and how do we help a teacher that's struggling, and all that? So this conversation between these two is just fabulous, and I've really enjoyed it myself. I hope you do as well. Here's episode 240.
Hi there, my name is Philip Walters. I am the band director at Greening Middle School, and I'm here with Nathan Coronado. He is the Music Fine Arts Administrator in the Anchorage School District in Anchorage, Alaska. I am here guest hosting, I guess, this podcast for the Growing Band Director. I talked to Kyle Smith about this idea to host a music administrator and find out what life is like on that side of the fence. And so Nathan has uh, willingly and graciously agreed to talk to us about what that life is like. So, Nathan, welcome.
Thank you.
Why don't we just go ahead and get right into it? Can you tell us, first of all, how long you've been working with Anchorage?
Yeah, this is my third year. My second year serving as the assistant director of music within the fine arts department.
Nathan, tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to be in Alaska.
Yeah, so I'll kind of just backtrack. This is my third year here. My second year here as an assistant director of music. But prior to moving here, I was a high school band director in Texas. I was living in the Houston area, taught in one of the suburbs, and I was an educator there for 6 years prior to my 3 years up here. And then, kind of backtracking some more, I was a student at the University of Houston, where I got my undergrad degree, but also after 4 years of teaching, I went and got my master's degree from there in administration. And what kind of got me into music was my high school experience. The educators I had there and the experiences that I had, not just with playing my instrument, but also with all my friends. That's kind of what inspired me to want to be in that world. And because of my teachers, I wanted to create an experience like I had. And I think a lot of educators kind of fall in a similar line of thought, but it was really where at the end of my college time, I realized I want to be an educator, I want to be a teacher, but I'm also thinking like what could be down the road? Like what could be after that? And I'd gotten a quote from or heard something from the director of the music school one time, and he said he was a great educator and teacher, but at one point he said, I don't just want to impact the people in my classroom and change their lives, but there's a whole community of musicians on this university's campus that I can impact. And when I heard that, I started thinking like, I can impact a couple hundred kids each year in a band room, right? But what can I do to really move and progress music education and the growth of people beyond that? And I kind of came to the conclusion that fine art, like just administration would be able to do that. And yeah. So but I think the other part of I think your question is like what brought me up here and how did I get up here?
Yeah.
And it was my wife. She had an amazing opportunity. We were just dating at the time. We lived together for a little bit, and then her job said, "Hey, are you mobile? Are you willing to move?" And we were like, "I guess so. Let's see what happens." And we're at the part of our lives where we don't have any children, and we were in our 20s. And it's like, if there's a time to explore and make a life change, let's try it. And so it's definitely been one that we have loved so incredibly much. Like I didn't know how much I would love all the winter activities here and just the accessibility to everything that's here in Anchorage. It's like what I tell people, it's a hidden gem. So,
Well, and I know I think when I actually asked you to do this, I think you had just gotten done fat biking, and I was in the middle of a hike somewhere when we were talking on the phone.
yeah.
And so yeah, we were both kind of exploring the other gems or the other parts of Alaska that really make it fun to live here. I have to give you a little bit of a hard time because you came from the second largest state in the union, and Alaskans like to talk about how we
Yeah.
are. If you cut Alaska in half, Texas would be the third biggest state and all that. So.
I didn't realize how much that was going to be noted to me when I was my first year up here, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm from Texas," and all the kids in the classroom were like, "You're, you know, that's not the biggest state, right?" And I was like, "Yes, I know that," and they were like, "Y'all act like it's the biggest," and I was,
A bit of a
"Well,
friendly rivalry going on.
a little bit, but it's not even close. Alaska is way larger."
Right.
Larger.
Now, as far as band goes, Texas is where it's at. I mean, I don't think anybody would deny that Texas is kind of like the band mecca of the United States. So,
Yeah.
uh, whenever there's anything band related going on up here, we kind of look at Texas and like, okay, what are they doing there? All right, we should probably be kind of looking in that direction too. So. Um, so can you tell me just, a little bit about your day to day? I mean, we as music educators, we know what happens in our classrooms. I don't know a lot about what happens on the administrative side of things.
Well, I'll tell you, it's kind of like, and when you're teaching every day is going to be a little bit different, right? The kids are going to come in, they're going to operate a little bit differently. What you do each day might vary. Um, I love that about being an educator. As an administrator, I feel like it's that, but like times four or five. There's so many different areas of my job, from supporting teachers and principals, but also like engaging the community and working with community organizations. You've also got the evaluation side, event logistics, just all the chaos of it being an administrator. It can sometimes be very heavily focused on one thing for a little bit and then it'll shift. And I think that's what I love so much about it is like there's a part of the year that I know is really busy and I can do everything I can to plan for that and get that ready so that everything kind of falls in line as best as I can hope for it to be. And sometimes in different years, it's going to be harder. It's going to have its different challenges. Like last year was the sixth grade move to middle school. And this year is, I think, more of a normal, like this is how things work, but there's more responsibilities that I get to take on this year. And so I think that's how I'm feeling the time. But to answer your question, every day is different, and there's many different facets and avenues that I get to work in. All of it of which I really love.
Excelsior Music Publishing is proud to sponsor the Growing Band Director podcast. Excelsior Music Publishing provides new music for concert band, jazz ensemble, solo and ensemble, and books for all levels and occasions, including a specially curated and robust selection of music for your contest and festival performances. A variety of overtures, marches, and lyric works included on numerous state lists await. Select music that's perfect for your contest and festival needs at excelsiormusic.com. That's EXCELCIA music.com.
So we were talking a little bit before this interview started about like right now you're finishing up the details for the Middle School Soul and Ensemble Festival that's happening.
Yeah.
That's something that's not an everyday thing, but that's a, hey, this is happening in 2 weeks. We need to get everything locked down.
Yeah, and it's like, we've got like some logistic calendars that we follow, thanks to the great David Hagan, if you're listening one day. Um, like there's been some things about my job that were kind of set in stone and created that I just jumped in and followed. And there's something this first year was a great opportunity last year for me to really look at, okay, here's what we're doing. Do I like how we're operating? Let's see how it goes and then assess and then look at making changes. Um, and I'm not the kind of administrator that's just going to be like, we're going to do it like this now for everything. I'm always going to do my best to try to get opinions from educators because to make any decision, you need buy-in if you really want to see it come to fruition. And so sometimes I like to just float ideas by educators and see what their thoughts are, good, bad, or ugly. And I always want the positive or the honest thoughts because that'll help me in my job. So yeah,
And
it's
that's
a good
one of
time.
that's one of the things that I've noticed working with you is that we you ask us a lot about, hey, what do you think about this? I mean, every educator I know will admit that change is hard in anything, but especially in school, it's hard to come by. Especially those of us who have been doing this for a little while, we're like, no, this is the way it goes. This is the way we've always done it. And there's been some big changes recently, partially because of you coming in and changing some things around based on feedback. So, a lot of it based on just education funding that we're running into, or lack thereof that we're running into right now, and having to make necessary changes just to keep things running. So, but yeah, making big changes is always you're going to run into some resistance with educators anyway,
Always.
and administration sometimes. So,
Yeah, when they say the quote, like you can't ever make everybody happy. Like I know that with every decision I make, there's probably going to be a frowny face, but it's about helping those people at some point if they feel so led to talk about it, as to help them understand maybe my decision making behind it. It's like when you teach kids, you don't just tell them what to do, you tell them and explain why, because kids understanding the why behind it is the same as like educators understanding the why. There's going to hopefully be a little bit more buy-in.
oh, and the educators explain understanding why is incredibly important because you're going to have a lot of resistance from teachers if you tell them, hey, do this thing, but you don't tell them why. But if you tell them why, then they might still disagree with it, but at least they'll understand there's a reason for it.
Yep.
So, what do you think are the most challenging aspects of your job?
That's that's always a hard question, because every aspect of my job, there's at least a difficult part of it. I would say probably like the hiring stuff is probably one of the most challenging, but also because it's probably one of the most important. Um, the what you whatever whoever I hire or help hire with principals, those are those lasting, that's like an investment, right? That's like when we purchase a car, we're hoping it meets all the criteria that we want it to have. And so when we hire somebody and we give our stamp of approval, it's us really saying out to the community or to the that school population, it's like this is who we think is going to be the best fit and best, asset to your world and to this program. And I think that's hard because you have to find and create questions that get past the typical, standard interview questions or answers, but more so diving into like the real nitty-gritty stuff. Like how do you respond when things don't go well? And really trying to get those responses out, um, because everybody always wants to impress in interviews. But when you can really start to find out a little bit more about how people think, it helps you make those choices. But I'd say definitely the most challenging aspect is, to me, is the hiring because it sets up everything else. It sets up how you can support that teacher, how the learning takes place in the classroom. It helps it's important because you got to help make sure that they're bought into your same vision for the department. So.
And when you're dealing with teachers, especially if you're dealing with experienced teachers, there's a lot of opinions there. There's a lot of this is the way we do it. And if you have two different teachers dealing with or with two different methods, they might both be good, but they might be doing it a different way. Yeah, the hiring process, you're kind of committing to that teacher saying, hey, we believe in you. We want you to be part of this.
Yep.
And they're kind of committing to you saying, I want to be a part of this program too.
Yeah, and
So,
it can be a success, and it can be principals giving you great feedback about the hire. It can also be like, hey, how can we support this person still? Because like there are some things that we're seeing, and like that's part of my job as well, is supporting principals and how they can help their music teachers. So, you know, the hiring stuff kind of like feeds into every aspect of the job.
Sponsorship for today's podcast is provided in part by Austin Custom Brass. Austin Custom Brass is the largest Adams brass dealer in the United States. Adams Brass makes some of the world's finest trumpets, flugelhorns, trombones, euphoniums, and tubas. Find out why some of the most renowned musicians in the world play Adams Brass, like many of the brass musicians from the Rotterdam Philharmonic Orchestra. Trent Austin, founder of Austin Custom Brass, is also an Adams artist. You can call Austin Custom Brass today at 816-410-0826 to learn more about Adams Brass or visit their website at www.austincustombrass.biz. Austin Custom Brass is located in Kansas City, Missouri. You can visit their shop to try Adams Brass instruments and many other brands of instruments, or you can call them online, have stuff shipped to you. They work with an entire band program. You can do bids in the PO process and fit within your budget and all that. They're an amazing resource for brass players. Check them out.
So how do you find good teachers? How do you find good educators?
Uh, I mean, a lot of it's conversations, right? It's talking to teachers about like, hey, do you know anybody moving up? It's about building a relationship with UAA. I know that for me, I think a lot of our secondary educators and I would also say our elementary educators have heard me talk about the relationship and the collaboration with UAA
And
because
UAA is University of Alaska in Anchorage.
yeah, yeah. So it's our local university. It's the entity that currently doesn't have a teaching certification program, but we're working to get that implemented and created. And it's going to be a little bit longer road than maybe we all can think about right now. But it's about creating sort of a system where we're feeding into our own programs. You know, we're sending it's like a pipeline, right? We're finding kids that want to go into music here in ASD and encouraging them and getting them plugged into UAA. And then when those kids are graduating and want to be music educators, like getting them into our world and building that relationship. And so, I mean, that's one big way that I think this city needs. And that it's been a big focus this year. I meet once a week with the UAA music ed professor, kind of the leader of it all, because I want there to be a relationship where we're talking about how to grow this thing we call music education here.
Yeah, and you also touched on the another challenge of the job is just getting people up here. I mean, we are fairly far away from the lower 48, and just even leaving the state involves a plane flight usually, unless you want to drive through Canada.
So marketing, right? I mean, getting jobs on job boards. I know we did that earlier when we had it was like late mid to late July. We had, you know, a job opening and we put up a job opening kind of advertisement out in the lower 48 in some of the AMEA websites, right? Or the Music Educator Association websites so that people can start hearing about it. And it's spreading it through different Facebook groups because people are always looking at stuff. People are always also reaching out and going, "Hey, I think I'd like to live in Alaska. Tell me more." And so when those things come up, it's having that like, here's what I'm going to say that's going to give them a cool, quick read on what teaching in Anchorage looks like.
So what does teaching in Anchorage look like? Let's go with that.
Yeah, well, let's jump to the pitch, right? Um, you know, this is definitely a place that's growing and it's changing, right? We're making adjustments with how our schools operate. So a lot of what I talk about is like our clientele, like the very diverse communities that we have. I talk a lot about the different mentors and how large the music community here is and how close knit we all are. When you join this community, you really start to get to know everybody, especially within the school district. There's so many different musicians that do activities and things with other musicians throughout town just because it's a large town with a small town feel. And I try to really make sure that when people are asking about what's it like to live up here outside of teaching, it's well, like we're all still we try to stay connected with each other outside of work too when we can, but also we have access to everything. All the things that you can imagine outdoors, you've got. You've got things you can do here that you can't do anywhere else. Um,
Yeah, I
yeah,
like
it's amazing.
whenever I
Yeah,
get done with work, I can go home, I can change clothes, and I can literally go hike a mountain in my backyard. It's right there.
yeah.
It's
And
not.
that's what I tell people too.
Yeah.
I can get on the Wolverine Trail. It's about 15 minutes from my house. And then in like a few hours, I'll be at the top looking down on Anchorage. And it's just right there. So I talk about that. I talk about the community aspect. I talk about how our district's growing. And I'm also real. I talk about the status of education in Alaska too, because I don't ever give like a false sense of appearance about what music education is here in Anchorage. I want people to really know like the good and maybe the things that we're still working on.
So we heard about the challenges of the job. Now, what do you feel is the probably your most enjoyable part of the job?
Um, when there's a lot of different times where I'm out and about, or I'm at a school, or I'm at a concert, and I try to be really observant of what's going on because my job is about taking where we are in music education here in Anchorage and elevating it, right? That's the point, is to get the community and the kids and the teachers and the administrators to all be about like wanting music to be a big deal here. And so when I hear people saying positive things about it, I would honestly say that's probably my favorite. And that may be a little cheesy, but it lets me know the work I'm doing, whether it's directly related or indirectly related, it lets me know the work I'm doing is worth it. And that, my purpose is coming to fruition. I know what I'm doing is making an impact.
We all like to have that feedback, right? We always like, I'm putting all this work into it. Is it
Yeah.
actually working? Do people actually appreciate it? Are people noticing it? I
Yeah.
mean,
I even had a parent come up to me one time and was like, "Thank you for getting my kid's name right when you announced it." And I was like, "Well, yeah, that's how this goes." And that's what I want. Like, I want people to have this mindset about music and ASD, the Anchorage School District, it's a great place to be where there's quality music experiences happening. And that takes time, and it takes a coalition of people, right? It takes a group of people, and the students, the teachers, the parents, the community members. And so when I hear parents come up and thank me for the small little things like that, it lets me know that we left a good impression on them, and hopefully now they see music here as a good place and a good thing.
well, and I will say the one thing, a little bit of my background, I grew up in Maryland, right outside of Washington, D.C. So I had access to like all the different
Yeah.
ensembles there and private lessons from military
Wow.
band instructors. It was amazing. I mean, it
Yeah,
wasn't,
I can
it
imagine.
was pretty dang close as far as the
Yeah.
music experience goes. And so when I moved to Alaska, I was expecting like, like the show Northern Exposure and the moose walking down
Oh,
the street.
yeah,
That happens, by the way, that happens here.
it does.
I wasn't expecting much as far as music goes, and I was actually pretty surprised how good the music programs are up here. And I think a lot of that has to do with the teachers. And actually, I know a lot of that has to do with the teachers. We have some really quality music teachers up here. So
You.
we may not have the necessarily the resources that some of the lower 48 schools do, but we have more than people expect. And
Yes.
and we have some fantastic teachers that can do a lot with it.
Yeah, I didn't really know a whole lot about like what I was walking into when I moved here. It was like, well, let's see what happens and let me just kind of get a sense of what music is like here and then, get involved how I can.
Okay. Let's see here. So, have you ever encountered anything that surprised you as a fine arts administrator? Anything that you're like, whoa, I was not expecting that.
I would say like these 2 years in this kind of job, it's maybe been a little bit different. Last year was what surprised me was all of the different things that goes on in the school district on top of music, right? Not to say like one's on top of the other, but like there's a lot going on. Um, I came I came from a school district that I don't think was trying to do as many moving pieces at once. And there's been a lot of really good things and a lot of improvements in the 3 years that I've been a part of this district outside of music. There's been a lot of growth in the board goals, and there's been a lot of movement towards things and initiatives that I think are helpful for teachers. And so that surprised me a little bit last year was just the number of things. I would say this year, probably the thing that surprised me the most was uh, just some of the back end work that I didn't have a super direct role in like navigating, but this year I get to, and it's been like a good change of like how can I manage my time better to make the most out of my day. Um, and so that surprised me. I was getting pulled into a lot of directions, and at some point I had to go, I need to make time for other things and other people, but I also got to make time for the job. And so, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned all the things that are happening in the district. I think that's probably part of the job as a music administrator that the music teachers in the classrooms don't necessarily see. We are hyper focused on our own program, on our own kids, and we just kind of like assume that everything that's supposed to happen outside of that is
Yeah.
supposed to happen outside of that.
Yeah.
Um, for example, like 2 or 3 years ago, no, 3 or 4 years ago at this point, uh, our middle school solo ensemble festival was canceled because the person who was in charge of it didn't get the judges. And so that's a logistical thing that as teachers we never would have really thought about it. We were like, oh well, yeah, the judges, obviously somebody's getting the judges. Well, nobody got the judges. And so having an administrator that actually is paying attention to those things and making sure that we have judges and we have a schedule and all that is something that we take for granted, but it's incredibly important because if it doesn't happen, that's an experience our kids don't get.
Yeah, there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff with events, but there's also, I mean, like you said, there's a lot of things that we're trying to juggle. There's a lot of district meetings that I'll go to. Sometimes there's a lot in a week, sometimes there's not any. And those are the weeks where it's like, okay, let me try to get into a school, or let me have this block of time to work on this. And so it's just a lot of juggling and a lot of spinning plates. That's the phrase I use a lot and be like, I got a lot of spinning plates right now. That's how like Leah, my counterpart, and Katie kind of know if I say something maybe along the lines of like, yeah, I got a lot of spinning plates, or if I say that to a teacher, it's like Nathan's busy right now.
Well, and it's fair to point out that you do have some support there in the office. Like
I do.
our
Oh my
administrator,
God.
Katie is like she's on it. She's more organized than anybody I've ever met. Um,
I'll say this right now so everybody can hear this. No one can ever take Katie West away from the fine arts department.
well, we
It
have
is
we have it on recording. There you go.
Dude, oh my God. I love Katie, and I also love Leah. Like Leah's been such a good person to bounce things off of and to kind of show me, like really show me the ropes of like, here's how you do this. Here's how you approach this. And I've got so many other people within the district too, my supervisors that have been super helpful in navigating this world with it really only being my second year.
Well, and I will say, and I think I mentioned this before, is that you are the first music administrator that we've had in this district, at least that I can remember, that's gone around and asked teachers on a regular basis, hey, what do you think about this? If we do this, what do you think? What are your ideas on this? Getting a lot of feedback from the teachers that technically you're our boss, at least to a certain extent, right? But you're also getting feedback from us on because we are the people that are in the classrooms, we're the ones that are seeing the kids, we're the ones whose programs are affected by decisions that you make.
Right.
So I think that's a really important thing, not to be a top-down, this is what's going to happen, but hey, if we do this, how will that affect your program?
Well, and I'd also say like there's some strategy to that. Like it's it shouldn't be on me to make every decision about our department, right? I think I should have probably the final say in how maybe some music things are operated, because my name will be on it at the end of the day. But my job as the administrator or the leader, I guess, of the music side of things is to know what people are thinking, um, like get their input and then make the best decision off of that. Like if I ask 10 different middle school band directors what they think about something, I'm going to get probably many different responses. But
So,
it's about taking what the consensus of the group may be, what may be the biggest concerns, and then making a choice that's going to be as fair and best for everybody. And in doing that as well, hopefully spark some seeds of thought that help people maybe go, maybe I should try that. Maybe I should do this a little bit differently. And I think that's where hopefully I think we're starting to see some more progress is I've seen more teachers trying new things or being more open-minded to things because like we should be. We shouldn't just be always stuck in our ways. We should be trying to find ways of growth. And I know that's been something when I suggest, hey, have we ever thought about like a PD that's focused around like how we count or how we work through problems in rehearsals? That's been really cool. I've also will say a lot of great things were here when I got here. Like a lot of great things were already taking place. So it's about finding where those programs are helping those teachers identify what those next steps would be. Because everybody, no matter whether you're, been in the classroom for a long time or not, we all got to find our next step for our programs.
So, as a fine arts administrator, what do you wish people knew about your job that they might not otherwise know?
I would say it's a lot of the advocacy part of the job. Um, there's not a whole lot of opportunities to really share with educators, like the meetings that we'll sit in and kind of learn about how decisions are being made, and then giving most of the time having a chance to provide how this may affect music or art or whatever it may be, which I really do appreciate a lot of decisions that are made. Like we at least get a seat at the table where we can get to hear and give some feedback. Um, but yeah, I would say like the advocacy part. I wish more people knew about that side of things, but also that my time is so valuable. But I have to say on the flip side, so is everybody else's. It's kind of like that example of like with teachers and parents. Like every parent thinks their kid is number one and wants you to have their kid as like the number one priority and thing. And I know parents also know this too, but there's also 30 of them or more in a class. And as a teacher, it's hard to juggle that. And I think sometimes as an administrator, I find myself in that too, where I'm like, I'm getting pulled, I'm getting pulled, I'm getting pulled. And it's about like finding what you can do now, what needs to be maybe delegated, what needs to be scheduled. That's kind of a little bit of kind of like how I sometimes try to approach it. Is this like an immediate fix? Is this an immediate need I need to do now? Or is this something that I can like not put on the back burner, but I can put this on my list of things to schedule when I have some more free time? Um,
Everything in perspective is pretty important. I feel like as band directors, we often think that the thing that's happening in our classroom is the most important thing, and the concert is the most important thing. I can't tell you the number of times I've gotten overly upset about a kid missing a concert when I mean when there's to the parents, the concert's just another thing that they have to drag their kid to. It's another thing that they have to put on their calendar. So it's just keeping everything in perspective there.
yeah,
So.
that's true.
If you were to want to get into fine arts administration, like
Uh,
this is I know there's I'm 20 years in. This is at the point where I'm starting to think about, okay, what's the next step? What are some steps that you should take if you wanted to get into that?
I think first you got to look at your skill set. I don't think any one person needs to have every skill or every tool in the toolbox to be able to be in a job like this. I'm a band person. I've done a year of orchestra. I'm trying my best to learn more about choir and more about elementary music. I try to ask questions as much as I can because it's my job to be able to help those teachers as best as possible. And so I do my best to ask and learn. Um, but I think it's musically you have to have a skill set, but also like how does your personality align with being a leader and making tough decisions and having tough conversations and being able to defend what you say and what you do to the people that you're working with because it happens a lot. My reason for making a middle school solo and ensemble schedule, I have reasons for putting things where they need to go, and a teacher may not understand that, but I got to be able to defend that to them.
Yeah, having
And
the tough conversations is really is it's not something that people necessarily think of at first, but I think we've probably all had administrators that had a hard time saying no, and that ended up being a bad thing. We also had
yeah,
some administrators that were way too eager to say no, and that ended up being a bad thing.
so I mean, I think it starts with your skill set, right? Because you got to be able to be a leader through your actions and like being able to tell somebody, hey, here's what you need to do to be better. Um, I think also you have to be okay with leaving the classroom. Um, it's weird working in the it's hard working in the education sector or like this world and not being in a classroom. It's different. It's weird. I feel like at times I'm like, oh, I'm just another corporate worker. I work on the business side of things. But getting to go into the classrooms is where you're like, okay, this is great. Back to my center. And but you have to be okay with leaving the class, knowing that you won't get that same experience and impact on kids that you were before. I think the next part really is your schooling, knowing like what needs to be done. My program was a 2-year program, and you have to be able to commit to something like that. Mine was I'd go from being hot and sweaty from a marching band practice, driving to downtown Houston, taking a 3 hour long class, and then going home and studying, and then waking up at 5 a.m. to go be a band director again. And there's just a lot of commitment that you got to make when you want to go and get that other degree. And there's many different ways to do it as well. I wanted an in-person experience, and so that's how I did it. I think the schooling part, and also within the schooling part, learning more so just how to be an administrator, not necessarily a fine arts administrator, because understanding the perspective of a principal and what they're thinking about helps me as a fine arts administrator with what to say to them next, or what I need to say to maybe, get things moving in the direction that they need to move. And I don't want to ask a principal who's dealing with a lot on their plate I don't want to ask them for something because they're going to be annoyed that I asked them for that. But if it's like, hey, things are going really well here, this is maybe the next step. We need to move this down the road, like just to put that on your radar. It's letting them know, like, this is where we're moving to. This is what's next. You're doing great. Or, there's a lot of different kind of conversations. But I think understanding that world is important, and on all the logistical things is the third thing I would say is the most important. And then the last thing is just the mentorship. Um, when I moved here, I was working at 7 different elementary schools, teaching one orchestra class at each one 3 times a week. That also meant when I was looking to go into administration, I had 7 different principals that I could become, close with and get to learn the world of administration. And then when the opportunity arises, I hopefully now I've also built some relationships with people that can also speak to my work ethic and what I can do. So I think it's a mixture of all those things: your skills, your commitment, your schooling, your mentorship, and really diving into the work. You have to kind of volunteer yourself to do more work so you can learn that world in hopes that down the road that investment will pay off.
Yeah, it's interesting because every now and then you'll hear like, "Oh, it must be easy being an administrator because you don't have to deal with kids on a regular basis, and you can go home at 5 p.m. and stuff like that." And most of the administrators I know are working way longer hours than any of the teachers I know.
Maybe.
You're getting there earlier, you're staying later, you're going to stuff on weekends, you're staying up, going to board meetings, all sorts of things. So it's not exactly a posh life. You get paid
Yeah.
more possibly, but I don't think that the hours per paycheck really work out in your to your advantage.
As a teacher, I never tried to look at how much money I was getting paid by the hour because, like, those sorts of things always just make you maybe a little bit sad because we always think we're worth probably more than what we're making. Um,
We usually are. I mean, when it comes
we,
down to it, we usually are, right?
but I also got to remember, like, there's waves of chaos in my job. There's parts of the year that are more chaotic than others, and other parts of the year that are a little bit slower. And so I try to keep that in perspective when I think about how crazy and how busy the life of an administrator can be.
So, as a fine arts administrator, one of your jobs is to evaluate some teachers in the district. So, you were mentioning you have about 10 people that you evaluate.
Somewhere in there, like I don't remember the exact number, but I'm on that website doing all the paperwork pretty frequently right now.
Okay. So what are some things if you're evaluating somebody, if you walk into their classroom, what are some things that say, hey, this person gets it. This is some high quality music education that's happening in this classroom.
Yeah, well, I really like to listen to what they're saying, right? I like to get an understanding of what their content knowledge is and like what they're saying to the kids is that right? Number one. I also like to look at their pacing and see how fast or slow they're moving through different skill development exercises or how they're working through a piece of music. I also kind of look at like how the kids are responding to that and what kind of differentiation or what tools is the teacher pulling out of their back pocket to go, oh, that was the problem. Here's how I fix it. You can really tell because like I'll be able to do the same thing I'll be able to listen and go, okay, they need to do they need to fix the rhythm. And sometimes it's pretty telling when it's like they focus on how they weren't starting together or something completely off base and you're like, But what you can tell is like how they're like when they pull a trick out of their box and it fixes it immediately, you're like, sweet.
Yeah.
Like, you're hearing it correctly and you're making that assessment. And actually, I didn't like that. I'm
Okay.
being picky.
That's okay.
Um,
So one of your jobs as a music administrator is to evaluate teachers. So if you were walking into somebody's classroom to evaluate them, what are some things that you would see in a classroom that would say, "Hey, this person knows what they're doing. This is some good quality education going on here."
you know, I would say I really first listen to what the teacher is saying. I'm listening to like how they are managing the class, like what kind of classroom management procedures they implement, how they start their class, like whether it's with good things or things like that. But then I really start to listen to like what their content knowledge is and like how they're using that knowledge when communicating it to their students. I look at that first. I look at how they're pacing out their class. So are they jumping from activity, really quickly? And what kind of learning is taking place within those? Is that enough time? Um, and then I look at how they're differentiating their instruction. So, you've got many different types of learners, but what tools is the teacher pulling out of their toolbox to go, okay, they played wrong rhythms here. Here's the thing I'm going to do to make it better now, and then be able to move on. So I'd say those three things alongside with like what is that program culture like? How is the teacher just communicating to students? How did the students communicate with one another? Um, how are the students operating as they come into the class? How do they leave the class? Because all those things matter. It helps set the tone for your class. It helps set the culture for your program. And so when I see a teacher doing some of those things, um, and showing some of those things, it goes, okay, yeah, that person knows what they're doing.
And you kind of touched on this, but like also them assessing what's happening in their classroom, like them responding to what's happening in their classroom. Like if they're hearing a mistake, are they fixing the mistake, or are this is what I'm going to do today, and they just kind of go through it, and that's what happens without any sort of adjustment.
Yeah, it's that responsiveness because like every teacher probably knows the lesson most of the time isn't going to go exactly to plan. There's going to be something that you have to adjust or change or try. And seeing how teachers respond to that based on what they hear, I think that's probably the fun stuff. That's the problem solving part of our job where we go, let me hear this group of kids.
Yep.
Let's focus right here for a second.
And you can go into a classroom or you can go into your class and be like, this is what we're going to do today. And at the end of the day, maybe some of that got done, and sometimes something else happens entirely. What's that quote that everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face? Is that a Mike Tyson quote or
I
something
think so, maybe.
like that?
I'm
Muhammad
not great
Ali,
with like quotes and names
famous
of people.
boxers, or the military version of it is no strategy survives first contact with the enemy. But I guess we don't really want to call the students our enemy, but you know what I'm talking about.
No, 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 no.
So let's say you go into a classroom and you can tell that an educator, well, the teacher there is struggling. What are some things that would be a sign that they are having a hard time?
I think it'd be probably a little bit of the opposite of what we would see from a teacher doing great. I also like to look at like how are the students responding? If you see a puzzled look on a kid's face and they're engaged with what you're doing, that's a sign like, did what I just say not make any sense? Seeing teachers have that awareness to read the room and go, okay, I need to change, or so that's another thing is looking at how the students are responding. But along with that, wrong content being discussed, or just doing the one thing that you know and moving on, or just try it again, try it again, try it again.
Oh man, yeah, that one. I think
Because
we're all thinking of that.
that just leads to boredom.
Yeah,
It leads to, just not making your time worth it. And as educators, every minute counts, and every second helping a kid is what we need to be putting our time towards.
yeah. Yeah, I think we're probably all guilty of the one more time, right? It's a
Or
joke.
speaking too long, right? Or going on a tangent, which
Yep,
I do sometimes.
yep.
It's the in college, the phrase that we would try to use on each other was, "Can you explain what you want fixed in 5 words or less?"
Talk less, play more, right?
Yeah.
That's totally
I would always encourage teachers to record themselves and time, sit with a timer and time how much the kids play versus you talking.
hate recording myself. I hate it. You just don't want to watch yourself, but you're right. That's exactly it.
The
And
most growth happens there, I think, because you can really reflect on your practices as a teacher.
yeah, when I've had student teachers and I've been evaluating them, or just giving them feedback, I'm like, how long did you spend on that exercise? My true confession, my first day student teaching middle school, the entire 45-minute period that I was on the podium was spent on the warm up.
Yeah. Oof.
It was we had my supervising teacher afterward was like, let's go for a walk and let's talk about what just happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
But we all got to start somewhere.
yeah, exactly. I mean,
We're all there.
exactly. You learn from that. Hopefully, you learn from that, right?
Yes.
So we've talked about this a little bit, but we've had there are good administrators, there are bad administrators, there are good administrators that might not get along with the music teachers. What do you do with what kind of advice do you have for music teachers who are maybe butting heads with their administrator a little bit, or have an administrator that doesn't necessarily understand how how music works in public education?
You also you got to think about the perspective of a principal and all the plates that they're spinning too. Your needs are your needs, and presenting those at the right time or the right place, when they hear that, they're gonna probably also think about the relationship they have with you. And so that's where I would say, like, to start first is like start with the relationship with that administrator. If you feel like there is tension with your administrator, like maybe you don't need to directly talk about it, but you can start taking action on things that will maybe repair that relationship. When I was a high school band director, I was always trying to find myself supporting the front office as much as I could. If they, when we were doing schedule changes, I found myself in the counselor's offices every day until during my planning period until all the kids were where they needed to be, because I want them to for me to help them with it. And I also just wanted to check in with our counselors, but I also check in with the administrators and go like, "Hey, how are you?" Like just getting to know who they are, and then talking about your program would be the next big thing. Like how you talk about it, what are the positive things that you're talking about? What ways on your campus are you now trying to show that music is a good place to be? Are you volunteering maybe a little bit of an inconvenient event for you to like show your principal that you're a team player? Do it, right? Um,
Try to
yeah,
say yes when you can, so you can say no when you have to, that sort of thing.
yeah, and it's some people say like you always say yes, you're just building up those favors. It's not about that, but it's about like building that trust and that dependability with your administrator that hopefully when decisions have to be made about things, they come to you and they discuss it with you and they give you a voice. But if you don't know them and you're not working to build and hold that good relationship with them, then that's where things could go a little bit wonky. But I think it's your relationship. It's about how you talk about your program. It's about how you like show up to things and how showing up on time or, just things of that nature. So like just being where you're supposed to be as an educator in that building, is the big part.
Well, and you touched on this a little bit when you were talking about going to the front office. I mean, the most important people in your school are the front office people, the counselors, and the custodians, right? You have a good relationship with them, and your life is going to be so much easier. Just
Yep. I don't know how many questions I would have as a teacher to the front office staff at my school, just so I could learn how does a bus request work? How does this process work? Because the more I learn, the more I get to learn about them. And the more I get to learn about them, the more they learn about me, and then we become friends. And so it works out really well when you do put effort into fostering relationships with those administrators.
It is it's a friendship. It's not a, hey, I'm going to only talk to you when I need something. It's, hey, I'm running by the I'm walking by the office. I don't have anywhere necessarily to be. I'm just going to pop in and say hey. So you've encountered a lot of music educators in your time here in Alaska, when you were in Texas. What are some things that you wish more educators knew in order to be successful in their careers?
I would say you never stop adjusting what you do. Like every year is going to be different. Every band program or orchestra program, whatever it may be, it's always every year going to be different. And so what works right now may not work next year. Um, you have to be open-minded. You have to be willing to try new things. You have to maybe learn something that you weren't ready to learn, but you need to be learning it because of a situation. I think um, that alongside like your words and your actions, they're seen very publicly to your community and to your students and to your administrators. And so, if you always, make a fit about something, people notice it. If you're always like highlighting your kids or making it about what you want your program to be about, it says a lot of really good things about you. And I think that's where I think we want, music education to go. We want it to be a place where kids are learning and growing as people and using music as a tool to make that happen. And, through the process, they fall in love with it and then want to share that with other people. Um, but I think to start, we have to be able to always stay willing to grow and change with the times, with the new exercises, with the new apps, because it's easy to get left behind if you're not staying up to date with how we're trying to continue to progress.
One thing that you just mentioned is kind of it's every now and then in the back of my mind. We are a very public facing aspect of our schools. Like
Sure.
for most other disciplines in school, yeah, there might be test scores or something like that that people can go and look up if they want to. But every 2 or 3 months, there's our what we've been teaching our kids right on display on a middle school auditorium stage or in a high school gymnasium or something like that. And it's like, all right, well, this is everything we've been working on. I hope it goes really well. And so it's a very public display of education, and hopefully it does go well, and sometimes it really doesn't, and you have to just remember that these are kids. I think it was a meme that I saw um, about, hey, it's festival time, here's that time that we put everybody on stage and hope that they don't drop kick our careers across the stage. It's
Yeah, I will say the great thing about knowing when you have those big performances is that you've got the time to get ready for it, right? You may be facing different barriers and challenges like everybody else, but you can always, whatever you're doing that day can always be a step in the direction that it needs to go. And then, like I mentioned before, it's about helping kids understand that like getting all the right notes and rhythms is super important because that's an expectation and that's you take that skill of wanting to get something right every time and you apply that into other worlds of careers and whatnot. Like that's a really valuable thing. And how people make choices is a really powerful thing. And music teaches that, and band class teaches camaraderie and teamwork. So yeah, it's crazy how much we have to shift and grow with all the things going.
all the hard work and study that you put into practicing, into all the teamwork that you put into band. Even if the student never plays another note past high school, they learn all that and they transfer it to the skills that they're using in college and beyond. So it's
Exactly.
as we're starting to wrap up here, I just want to see if you have any advice for somebody who is looking to become a music teacher.
Yeah, I would say find a mentor. Find somebody that you know, you trust, and I think be willing to go out of your comfort zone if it's somebody that like you think may not want to give you the time of day. Like put yourself in front of them through communicate any form of communication. Just say like, "Hey, I want to become a better blank teacher, and I would love to maybe chat with you and learn from you for a little bit." is there a time where maybe I could come watch you? Or is there a time we could get a coffee? Those like heart-to-heart conversations and being vulnerable it's important because that shows whoever that mentor is that somebody wants to learn from you. That's a good feeling. But also it helps that person go like, I need to show if what I'm doing is so successful that somebody wants to learn from me, it's time for me to start spreading my knowledge and sharing the things that work really, really well. So, I would say that find a mentor, find somebody that you're willing to be open and vulnerable with about your teaching abilities and really work through like, this went well. What do I do to make it better? This didn't go well. How do I fix it? Um, and just like build that camaraderie. I'd say do that. I'd also say like work on the things that you're not good at. If you're great at playing a certain instrument, great. Keep up with it because that's cool. But start learning the things that maybe you're struggling with. Because at some point that might be on display. And you really want to make sure like you know the fingering for that note, or you know exactly what kind of role that's supposed to be.
And
That's really important.
I faked my way through teaching high school for 8 years, being a really good brass player. And high school, you can kind of get away with it because by that point, they're supposed to know what they're doing. I'm realizing now that they didn't, and I really wish I could go back and fix things. But I became so much of a better teacher when I started teaching beginning band because I had to know all the instruments. Because if I didn't know it, they wouldn't know it either. And
Yeah.
so, yeah.
And I would add, I mean, I think middle school is a great place to start if you're wanting to get into like a band or orchestra or choir. I think I think getting into elementary music is also an amazing place to get started. I've seen, this year I've seen some educators that have gone from elementary into like a more focused content, and like their skills and the things they do there directly apply because K-12, they're kids, right? Their body sizes change, their personalities adjust a little bit, their attitudes maybe change a little bit, but like kids, if they're excited about something, they're going to want to be a part of it and they're going to want to learn no matter the age. And so as a teacher, if you can learn from a mentor and like work on your skill set, like to where kids are going to have a great experience with you, you're going to be just fine.
All right. Well, Nathan Coronado, one last opportunity to pitch Alaska for
Yeah.
teachers who are looking for an adventure. You want to talk any more about teaching in Alaska before we're done?
I would say you need to come up to Alaska. Don't don't get into all the different looking in, just do it because you're not going to regret it. It's been a great place for me, and I know it's been a great place for some of our other educators. And like with any job, starting a new job, there's going to be a hard time to work through. There's going to be taking over from how somebody did things before you, or there's going to be challenges that you got to face. The challenges exist in every school, but having it here in Alaska is a completely amazing place to be. So you should be a part of it. Get excited with all the extra things that we have here, all the little gems of outdoor activities or community that we've got here. It exists, and you should be a part of it.
All right. Well, Nathan, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate being able to talk with you about this and hope to talk to you soon.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We sincerely appreciate you taking your valuable time and listening to the Growing Band Director podcast. Your students are very lucky to have a band director like you. If you have any suggestions for episode topics or think you have an area of expertise to share on a show with us, please reach out. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to help spread the word, please give us a 5-star review and tell your band director friends to subscribe as well. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, our YouTube channel, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening to The Growing Band Director. See you next week.